Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our final couple of sessions of day 3 of Event Tech Live 2020. We're going to bring Caitlin Kobrak onto screen. She's going to be delivering our next session, and she's going to be looking at creating an engaged social media community for B2B events. Caitlin, good to see you. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you doing?
Not too bad at all, thank you very much. We are getting close to the end of day 3. Not that we're wanting it to go quickly, but we're already 24 hours beyond where we would usually be as a live event with our 2 days on site. But enough about that. We're looking forward to hearing what you've got to say. So the virtual floor is yours. Over to you, Caitlin.
Thank you very much. So yes, I'm Caitlin, and I'm going to be talking about creating an engaged social media community for B2B events. So I'll start with a little bit about me. Normally I put a picture up on the screen because if I ever speak at an event, I'm only 5'1" and I struggle to see people on stages. So I sometimes worry that people can't see me. Obviously, we're in a virtual space. It's not quite the same. But in case you can't see me, here is another picture. So I'm Caitlin. I am a digital producer here at George P. Johnson. And for those who maybe don't know, GPJ is a global experience brand agency, and we produce events across the globe and for a variety of different clients. And my role as a digital producer is specifically in the social space. So I look after and manage the social and marketing campaigns that we produce for our clients. And typically that is for events, but it obviously can sometimes involve digital activations or things that we're promoting where our clients are speaking. And one of the events that I'm very privileged to work on is an event called Cisco Live Europe. And I don't know if any of you attended, but on Monday there was a session that my colleagues Matt and Zara did about the Rainwalk, which was an activation that we produced at Cisco Live Europe this past January when we were in Barcelona. And in case you don't know what this is, Cisco Live Europe is an IT technology event, and when we did it this year, it had about 15,000 attendees, and it's aimed at IT experts and engineers, developers really, where they can get a deep dive into technical education, they can meet with Cisco experts, and they can connect with kind of their peers and colleagues. And the reason I kind of give this context of the Cisco Live event is because I shall be using that throughout this presentation as the real world examples of how we at GPJ create an engaged social media community. And this wonderful slide is and sadly it is just a handful of the people that produced the event this past year. We are, like many, pivoting across to a virtual event for 2021. So some of the examples that I'm giving, this community aspect works both in the live space, but also when we're looking at it from a kind of a virtual perspective. But I suppose what we're here to talk about is an engaged community, and it makes sense to start with what do we mean by a community. So for me, this is about a group of like-minded individuals. Personally, I am a big fan of space, as in outside of Earth. And for example, when the SpaceX launch happened to the International Space Station, I got the chance to talk to people who work in space travel. Obviously, we can tell it's not an area that I'm clued into in a technical side, but I really find it quite fascinating. And the great thing about social is the chance to connect people who work in that field or are interested in those areas. And so when we talk about kind of creating a community, you can use this in many different ways, whether it is about an interest you have, a band that you have, but we're talking about it from an events perspective and specifically a B2B perspective. And community is still relevant because it's a chance for like-minded individuals to connect, and it's an opportunity for us to facilitate a space where they can either connect with peers, talk to experts, speakers, and it's also a chance to kind of learn more about what is taking place at the event. So when I'm talking about community from a B2B event perspective, it's what can we offer these people an insight into? Well, it's how do they get the most from their experience across the live event or same way that from what we're doing today with Event Tech Live is a virtual experience. This is a wonderful picture from actually Cisco Live 2 years ago. So this is 2019. And we take this online community and we kind of create something for people when they're physically at the event as well, because the community side extends across our whole kind of experience and the different touch points that you have. And we do an event called the Claire Social, which is a chance for people to see in person people they've maybe connected with online in the build up to the event, or maybe from the previous event. So now we kind of understand what I mean and what we mean about community in the sense of what I'm discussing. But I think it's very important at this point to kind of say that it's not complicated what we're doing here. Even though we are discussing this in a B2B area, we're still just talking to a person. At the end of the day, yes, B2B typically means that we're discussing someone's work, but they're still a human. They're still interested in things that go on. You know, I love marketing, but I also really like space. So throughout this, I just want you to remember that it is simple and it is a person, and it's not overly complicated. So let's kind of crack into what we're all here for, which is how do you do it? What do you need to do to create this engaged community? Well, I've broken this down into what I think are 3 very simple steps. I will give 2 very quick caveats here. One, what I'm maybe about to say is not groundbreaking. I think you will all have heard many of it before. You probably already do quite a lot of it. And it is top level, because these are the kind of 3 steps that you need to start to do to get into this engaged community. And I'm very happy if there's questions that are more specific to kind of jump into them. And then the second thing is that ideally, we're looking at this from a long-term perspective. Sadly, there's no quick win. If you have an event in 2 weeks' time and you follow these steps, it's very unlikely that you will create an engaged community. But if you start now, you will reach that point by following these steps. So what's the first step? Oh, as I said, it's not groundbreaking, because it is establish what your objective is. Now, this is really key. It's about establishing, what the objective of the event is. So typically in a B2B space, and I mean this in a very generic and top line way, but often it's about selling more products, right? That's what the objective of the event is. But then you need to break it down into, okay, the event objective is selling more products. Well, what's the goals then of marketing? What are the KPIs that we want to gain? Well, potentially it's brand awareness. We want to get more people aware of what is aware of the event. We want more people to attend, so it's brand awareness. And then we need to go into, well, what is the social strategy to reach those goals, those marketing goals? Because you may be on a range of different platforms and it might differ slightly on each channel, but you need to we do need to know, sadly, what the objective of the event is, then what the marketing goals are, and how does that apply from a social side. I'm going to share with you, these are real ones. This is what we use for Cisco Live Europe. We kind of create our social strategy. We're an annual event. It takes place every year. So I have the benefit of long-term focus. But equally, we have a specific set of social channels for Cisco Live Europe, which means that we create content all year round. So when we break down the social strategy, we're thinking about it from a pre-event standpoint, on-site, and post-event, as you kind of would expect. And when we're thinking about the community side, yes, we want to facilitate a community, ideally, all year round, but predominantly, we know that engagement, that interest is going to come in the very close to the event, pre-event, aka about a month before the event takes place. Obviously, on-site, it's going to be quite big, and then in the kind of following couple of days, post-event as well. I also would say that it's quite useful / very useful to look at what your marketing goals may be, or your social marketing goals are, not just the KPIs. So a KPI would obviously be, if you want to have brand awareness, maybe there is a need to have a 10% increase in followers, which is great. But having goals which are maybe less tangible to kind of prove that you've reached them is really useful, because you can show it, but it means that it's not just all about numbers, because a community and I suppose engagement on social, there's positives to having a smaller level. It's not always about the huge giant numbers, and I'll maybe mention a bit more about that in a little bit of detail. But we have some which is, create an experience that's for both on and off-site delegates. Obviously, you can tell that this is geared more towards a live event, because currently we're working for no one being on site. And then also kind of stuff like humanizing the brand. And we can show ways that we've hit these, which is really key. So then, I suppose, what's step two? Well, step two is to understand your expertise. Where do your expertise lie? Where kind of do they stop? For example, I'm a marketeer and I can talk about Cisco Live Europe and the event on the back. I know everything about it. It's an event I've worked on for 5 years, and I know how it runs. I know everything about it, but I don't know much about what is discussed at the event. I have no idea really how a router works. I don't really understand how IT and cloud works. And that's what the audience is there for. So the audience has a deeper understanding of what's being discussed, and I don't. So therefore, I'm not always, and the same way that you probably aren't always, the right person to facilitate the community. And this is where it's important to kind of know when to build in and bring in a team, or know where to go for that. So there's a couple of ways that you can do this. Bring in people who maybe work in the technical side. If your event is technical, I should say. So using Cisco Live Europe as the example, these are IT engineers, they're developers, they're coders, and often they are maybe looking to build an infrastructure for their company. So they, I don't know, are kitting out their new Wi-Fi for the office. As we can tell, I'm not the expert in this, but we do have a team who are experts. So we have a group of people called the Network Operations Team, and they build the network, the internet access, for the event on site. So that is a huge amount of work, and it's brilliant because they're actually using Cisco products for an experience which is very similar to what a lot of the audience are going to be doing. Okay, it's not for an event, and they might be doing it for a permanent office, but it falls into the same category. So we bring in that NOC team to kind of discuss things. And some of the ways that you can kind of see where you need to go, or where you can kind of gather the team, the types of people. It might be clients, it might be kind of delving in and kind of connecting with the different teams there, but it also could be that actually the people that you want to connect with are speakers or past delegates from an event. We use Twitter lists as a way to kind of acknowledge and see where these people are, and to just kind of gather an understanding of what is being discussed, because it leads very nicely onto what the third step is, which is communicate. Again, I did say that it's not groundbreaking, but to create an engaged community, you need to listen to your audience. You need to know what they're interested in. And then you also need to involve them in decisions and make them part of that experience, because that will lead to opportunities where you can gather user-generated content. And in the current climate, where we are having to kind of move over and shift to online and virtual events, it's a chance to actually know what your audience, what your community want. We use it a lot, and I don't think you'll be able to read any of what's on this screen, other than I have, yes, once again, added a picture with my own face in. But one of our goals, thank you for changing that. So one of our goals, as you saw at the start, was humanizing the brand. And again, we're there to foster a sense of community. So I'm not the technical person, and I'm not going to be the right person, nor is the team that I build of community managers necessarily going to be the right people to kind of give someone an example of, say they're interested in cloud and they've attended a certain session and they're like, oh, does anyone know of any more that are happening across this event? We're not going to be able to answer that. We have over 1,000 sessions that take place when the event is live. So we're not going to know it, but our audience and our fellow speakers and peers might do. They might work in that cloud thing and they'll share stuff. And so this humanizing brand, we still have connections with these people. So the post that has my face in, it's a guy called Dimitri. He is a delegate. He attends the event every year. He's also a speaker as well in some parts of it. And he comes along and he knows who I am. He knows who the team are, because we've built this community over the years that mean when we're on site, we have actual discussions with these people. And yeah, okay, they know that we're the marketing team, but they still understand that we're part of this experience. And that's because we offer a two-way conversation, again, in the area where I'm an expert, but I can talk about the event. We know what things are worth doing, and we can ask the audience to engage in that. And that's how we kind of foster this. And then we also kind of get actual feedback from people as well. They're not afraid to kind of, and you'll probably see this as well, they're not afraid to tell you when things are going wrong. And that means, what's great about that is it gives you that chance to kind of get firsthand what works and what doesn't, and what do people actually want to see. There are huge positives to creating an engaged community, and having this chance to kind of to build a group of people that you can connect with. First of all, it enhances the content that you're creating. It gives you insight into what these people are actually interested in. Sure, you might not always know how to utilize that if maybe what the event is talking about is focused in a different area, like we're talking about technology, but it means that you know where to tap into certain things. The second thing, it gives you a chance to utilize people to connect with, whether they create content that's user generated that you can then share, or it gives you a group of people that you can maybe bring into the branded content that you're creating. That ability to extend the team, to know where your knowledge lies, can also mean that you're then able to pull in different people who maybe are they attended their first event that year, and you're like, oh, they were really engaged and interested. And actually on this page, there is a delegate who, you know, sent us quite a few messages. He'd never been to the event before. He'd kind of seen it online, and he attended for the first time. And, you know, he kept asking us things, and we were able to connect him with speakers who we thought he'd be in, like, who were relevant to what he was interested in. And then the third thing, and it kind of falls into kind of what I've just said, but it gives you a chance to recognize maybe who could be influencers in that field. So it might be speakers that are really vocal. How can you use them? Can they then help you with the brand awareness? Again, it all ties back into the objectives that we put forward. So how do you create an engaged social media community for B2B events? Well, as I said, it is 3 very simple, semi-simple goals. First of all, establish what your objectives are, what your goals are. Step 2, understand where you're the expert and where you maybe need to bring in people. And then 3 is listen, engage, and have conversations. Now, I know I said that this is kind of very top level. There's obviously more that goes into this in terms of the content that you produce, and how you then maybe get people to be influencers or brand ambassadors of your event. There have been some really great talks over the last couple of days, and there's 2 in particular that happened earlier today that I think could give more information if you're interested in that. But there was a talk earlier today by, I think, Dahlia and Rachel, where they talked about the top 7 content marketing tactics that will get your event noticed. That was brilliant if you're looking to kind of gauge a bit more understanding into what type of content do you produce and how. And then Mariska did a talk on how to remain top of mind amongst your target audience, and she specifically talked about using influencers, and again discussed it in a B2B space. So I would also recommend that you go and rewatch if you're able to, and if not, connect with those people and see if they'd be willing to share it. But I think it's very straightforward creating a community. And I don't just say that because I have the luxury of having done it, but actually, and I know I said it at the start, but we're just talking to people. And once you understand what your event is focusing on and what people are interested in, it's quite straightforward to then find a way to connect with people. And it does take time, and it might be that year 1 and year 2 is very much just about increasing your engagement level. But if you take some of these tactics, then hopefully you'll create that community that you're looking for. So I have gone through this very quickly, I am someone who likes to talk very fast. So hopefully, maybe there are questions. Um, and thank you very much for this. I'll add.
Hello, Caitlin.
Hello. Sorry, I think I really went through that very quickly.
No need to apologise. And just going back right to the very start of your session, you and I feel the same pain points when it comes to standing in front of very tall lecterns on very high
Yeah,
stages. You know,
yeah.
I'm equally not blessed with a huge amount of height. So
You
I
guys
have been
are
known to
quite-
have to stand on boxes when interviewing people
Oh,
on camera before.
I have not had to interview people on camera, but at 5'1", I think it is probably very similar that I would equally be having to stand in a box for most people.
If you've got a few minutes to spare, we've got a question on here from Glisser that we'll throw out to you. What percentage do you think, or which percentage of social media do you think social media can affect in both positive and negative way an event? What percentage do you think social media can affect in both positive and negative ways an event? Difficult to put a percentage on it, but I suppose
I,
that there's arguments for both, isn't there? That comes down to your crisis communication plan as well.
yeah, I mean, I would say that social can hugely impact, but either if an event is successful or not. I think one of the reasons why Cisco Live does have kind of a big social presence is because, in part, when the event is taking place, we know, and I'm going to use this in a live environment because I think it will differ from a virtual experience. But like people care about the experience they have from the food and from kind of how they're welcomed into the experience. And if any of those touch points are has an issue, typically, especially nowadays, people tend to complain on social. So I
Mm.
have we do a lot on having community managers on site, but also in the build up to the event because we can then jump on any question that's asked, any issue that's
Hmm.
raised, and I suppose turn around that experience from what could be potentially negative to quite a positive experience. Not I don't think it was last year, but not I don't think it was 2020, but it might have been the year before. We had a delegate who had special requirements in terms of dietary requirements of what they could have. And for whatever reason, when they got to the dietary area, the food wasn't there. They complained on social, but we picked that up, I think, within the first 2 minutes, managed to get it to our F&B manager, who then went and met this person, and for the next 4 days would go and meet him for the food at lunchtime to make sure that it was correct and in place. Now, that would only have been caught because we have the ability to utilize a team of people on social. So I think it's huge. I do think it's hugely important, and I'm not just saying that because otherwise I would not have a job. But I think
Yeah.
now how people talk about things, it is online, and they're not afraid to kind of say when stuff is both good and bad.
Well, that's the thing. If somebody has had a bit of a whinge about something because one of these touch points that you mentioned has not met their expectations and they take to social media to whinge about it, it stands to reason that if you deal with that in an appropriate way and you address the issue, you communicate that to the person who's made that complaint or had a bit of an issue with something, it stands to reason that then they're going to go back on social media to convey their positive experience of having been dealt
Mhm.
with. So you can still win out of negative situations on social media if you handle the bit in between correctly.
Yeah. And I also think it's why a community aspect can be really beneficial because sometimes, especially when we are doing it in a B2B area, and again, if it's not a discipline that you are, I suppose, knowledgeable in, if as someone is not maybe gaining the most from the speaker who's talking, or it's not as in depth
Hmm.
as you maybe like. The great thing about that community side is you may find that there are other speakers or other attendees who kind of drop in and say, oh, actually, if you're looking for more in-depth X, go to this session that's happening or watch this thing and it can be really helpful. And I think community can apply to both those who are attending, but also how do you then I'm using too many words that begin with C, but how do you communicate with the community what is happening at the event in a more deeper level, I suppose.
No, you're absolutely right. And we need to maybe get out this idea, and this is something that was mentioned first thing this morning by Martin Van Ness, and I'm going to have a flick through my notes here that I keep, because it was very much something that he said, to use C and I, not Q and A, conversations and input instead of question and answer, which I thought was a great way of looking at it. And that goes for social media as well. Rather than it just being somebody fires something that way and somebody gives them a response that way, we can go in many different directions with the right communities. And this idea that Martin Van Ness put forward earlier on today in his session of C and I, conversations and input, what would you think of that?
I think it is. I think that's a brilliant way to kind of describe it. I have never heard that as a description, but yeah, completely. Because in the steps to build a community, you do need to like really delve into what people are interested in, and that gives you opportunities. It takes you that step on, right? It's not just, oh, I'm here to market an event, come along and see it. By listening, by engaging, you're then creating content and social content that is deeper, that kind of is more informative, that in the long run is going to make sure that people are fully aware that your event is kind of hitting those marks. I think that's a brilliant way to explain it, and I may have to steal it.
Steal it, write it down, everybody. And I credit, like, as I said, Martin Van Ness, who joined us earlier today, who put forward that term C and I, conversations and input. We've had a couple more questions come in on Glisser for you, Caitlin. I'll just turn to those for a second. What are your favourite platforms to create B2B engagement? In your opinion, what kind of media, brackets, videos, photos, live chat, is more effective or most effective?
I would say, and it's not very helpful, but the best channel depends on where the audience is. I personally, for me, Twitter's fantastic for it, and weirdly, I think is the most relevant for the audiences that I tend to work with. Obviously, LinkedIn is a good one for B2B because it is where audience is going to be, but I don't think it offers the same connections as maybe Twitter does. In terms of content, for the actual conversation, the community element, I don't think you need anything more than just to reply to people and actually have chats, and that can easily be just a Twitter post and just text based. But I think we all know that video content works brilliantly, and depending on what your marketing message is, yes, you should definitely have video included in it without a shadow of a doubt. Even if that video is just turning into a GIF, you'll do well.
Thanks to Julie Burgos for that question and for submitting it. And Caitlin, at this point, before we wrap up, I should say that I think this is a hat trick of appearances from George P. Johnson. We had Matt and Zara, I think, was it either yesterday or on day one. So we should have some sort of hat trick trophy, hat trick ball for you. Thanks very much. Absolutely. No, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a great session. Thanks to everybody for your questions. Caitlin Kobrak from George P. Johnson. We'll see you very soon. Thanks for joining us.
Bye.